Imagine waking up to a world wrapped entirely in white, not just outside but inside your own home, where your breath clouded in the air and frost painted ferns on the windows. From the inside, this wasn't a holiday postcard. This was daily life during Britain's harshest winters in the 1960s, back when snow-buried cars, rivers turned to ice, and fireplaces became the heart of the home. When comfort wasn't a thermostat click, but a steaming mug of cocoa in cold hands, and warmth came more from people than from power. In this video, we're going back, not just to the coldest decade, but to the memories etched into the frost, the mornings, the meals, the mittens, and the moments that shaped an entire generation. So wrap up warm, settle in close, and let us take you on a journey through Britain's frozen past when every flake of snow came with a story. When nature was no longer gentle, there are winters you remember, and then there are winters that remember you. In the early 1960s, Britain faced a string of cold seasons that tested not just patience, but spirit, and none more so than the winter of 1963, a freeze so deep it's still spoken of with awe today. That year, the cold didn't simply visit, it moved in, took up residence, and made itself known in every corner of life. Snowfall wasn't gentle. It didn't dust rooftops or blanket the lawn. It buried cars, swallowed fences, and turned village lanes into narrow glacial corridors. Trains stood frozen on the tracks. Buses abandoned in white drifts. Roads disappeared under layers so thick that men had to carve paths by hand, shoveling snow up to their waists just to make it to work. And yet the world didn't stop. It couldn't. People wrapped themselves in determination as much as in wool. Fathers pushed through blizzards to reach the factory. Mothers bundled babies in prams and braved the ice-crusted streets. Children, ever resilient, turned every frozen canal and pond into a playground, skating and sliding where water once flowed. It was a season where necessity and joy coexisted, where survival and celebration shared the same icy stage. But the beauty of those days carried a quiet menace. The sea itself, usually restless and roaring, lay still, a brittle skin of ice forming along its edge, as if nature had pressed pause. Rivers and canals froze so solid that they looked like glass roads stretching into the fog. In some places, even the Thames flirted with freezing, a rare and unsettling sight. And then there were the windows. Every pane of glass was etched with frost, not from the outside, but from within, as if winter was trying to creep into every room, every breath, every bone. You'd wake up in the morning, and the world beyond your window would be a swirling blur of white and silence. Even the air inside your own home felt like it could bite. But amidst that cold, there was something almost poetic: the hiss of coal in the grate, the soft whisper of snowflakes against the roof. The way sound seemed to vanish beneath the snow, as if the world itself was holding its breath. It wasn't a postcard, it wasn't romantic. It was raw, punishing, beautiful, and unforgettable. Looking back, the winter of '63 and its bitter siblings weren't just about temperature. They were about tenacity, about people finding ways to move, work, laugh, and live when the world around them had all but frozen in place. It was a time when nature reminded us who was in charge, and when ordinary people responded, not with complaint, but with quiet, enduring strength. The cold days that warmed the heart. When the cold outside made every step sting and every breath hang in the air, warmth wasn't just about heat, it was about people, about moments, about the rituals that turned hardship into comfort. Inside British homes in the 1960s, staying warm was a full-time effort. Central heating, that was a luxury for the few. Most families relied on coal fires fed by hand and tended like sacred altars. The fireplace was the beating heart of the house, not just physically but emotionally. It was where families gathered, where children played, and where meals were eaten huddled close, not for elegance, but for survival. Bedrooms? They were ice boxes. Frost crept along the inside of windows like delicate silver ferns. Getting into bed meant pulling on extra socks and flannel pajamas, then slipping between cold sheets that bit at the skin. But if you were lucky, someone had already placed a hot water bottle beneath the blankets, a small miracle of warmth that felt like being handed the sun. Those bottles, usually wrapped in old sweaters or handmade covers, were more than just rubber and steam. They were lifelines, lovingly prepared by parents who knew exactly where their children's toes would land first. Fashion, too, was less about flair and more about fortitude. Coats were long, heavy, and often patched. Scarves wrapped twice, maybe even three times around necks. Woolen jumpers were thick, often scratchy, and usually hand-knitted by a mother or grandmother whose fingers worked tirelessly through evenings by the fire. Hats covered ears. Gloves were passed down. Warmth lived in the stitches. The kitchen, though often just as cold, was where another kind of magic brewed. Winters in the 60s smelled like beef stew, bubble and squeak, and golden pies baking slow in gas ovens. Every meal stretched to fill bellies and warm souls. Thick gravy poured like comfort onto chipped plates. Steamed puddings, sticky with syrup, waited patiently on the stove, their sweetness a reward for a day well braved. And when water pipes froze, as they often did, even hot water became a commodity, carried kettle by kettle from the fire. Every splash of warmth was earned, not assumed. Toilets outside the house were a dreaded norm. Imagine the chill of midnight walks across a frozen yard, cheeks stinging, breath curling like smoke. That porcelain seat was often as cold as the air. Still you went, because you had to, and you laughed about it later. Evenings were spent together in the one warm room. The television, black and white, stood like a glowing sentinel. Children pressed in close, the static hum somehow adding to the comfort. The fire flickered, board games spread across the floor. Tea steamed in mismatched mugs. The room wasn't just warmer than the rest. It was the home, and that's what people remember. Not just the cold, but the closeness, the care, the unspoken rituals of staying warm, not just with fire, but with each other. In a world without modern comfort, they built their own. With every log on the fire, every stitched sweater, and every shared blanket, they lit a warmth that machines could never replicate. Winter through a child's eyes. For those who grew up in Britain during the 1960s, winter wasn't just cold, it was magic. Harsh, yes. Inconvenient, absolutely. But if you were a child, it was the season when the world transformed overnight into something thrilling, something new. A vast playground covered in white. School closures weren't scheduled. They were surprises, gifts handed down from the sky. A blizzard didn't just mean bad roads. It meant freedom. No homework, no uniforms, just boots, mittens, and an open field calling your name. With snow packed deep and crisp, even the most ordinary hills became the stuff of legend. Not every child had a sled, but that hardly mattered. Baking trays, tin sheets, plastic bin lids, anything smooth became a ticket to ride. You'd line up at the top, heart pounding, fingers tingling with cold and excitement, then fly down, laughing so hard you couldn't feel your cheeks. Helmets? Nobody had them, and somehow it didn't matter. There were bumps, bruises, the occasional tumble, but that was part of the thrill. You came home wet, red-faced and glowing, steam rising off your coat as you peeled off the frozen layers beside the fire. That fire, oh, that fire, was where childhood memories settled like snowflakes. Around it, clothes dried in circles, socks, scarves, gloves stiff with ice just minutes earlier. And while they dried, the kitchen filled with warmth and smell. Steaming bowls of soup, crusty bread thick with butter, maybe even a sweet pudding if you were lucky. Everything tasted better when you'd earned it in the cold. But these winters weren't just about play. They were about community, in a way that's rare today. Kids carried buckets of water to neighbors whose pipes had frozen. They delivered letters, firewood, even a slice of pie if Mom had baked extra. They weren't chores, they were just what you did. Adults looked after each other too. If old Mr. Harris hadn't been seen in 2 days, someone knocked. If the Smiths were short on coal, there was always a bit to spare. A cup of sugar traded across fences. A pair of mittens passed to a child who'd outgrown theirs. These weren't acts of charity. They were the rhythm of life in a world where survival was shared. And though most of it went unrecorded, no selfies, no videos, no winter drone shots, it lives on in perfect clarity inside the people who were there. Ask anyone who lived through it, and their eyes light up. Oh, the winters back then. They were something else. The hills are quieter now. The snow doesn't seem to fall like it used to. But the memories remain, not frozen, but preserved, like stories pressed between pages of a well-loved book. And perhaps that's the real beauty of those winters. Not in what they were, but in what they gave. Freedom, family, and the kind of warmth you only feel when the world outside is bitter cold. Looking back, the winters of 1960s Britain weren't just colder. They were deeper, not just in snow, but in meaning. In those frozen days, life slowed down. Families drew closer, neighbors looked out for each other, and even the simplest moments, a bowl of stew, a hot water bottle, a sled ride down a snowy hill, became treasures. Yes, the cold bit harder, but so did the laughter echoing down icy streets. So did the warmth of a fire where every sock, scarf, and story was shared. These were winters not built on convenience, but on character. Not warmed by machines, but by the people who endured them together. And perhaps that's why we still remember them. Not just for the weather, but for how they made us feel. Resilient, connected, alive. If this journey stirred a memory or made you smile at a time now past, we'd love to have you stay a while. Hit that subscribe button and join us at the British Chronicle, where we explore more stories from history's quieter corners and where every memory has its place. Because the past isn't just behind us, sometimes it still warms us, like a fire on the coldest night.